Okay, so last time we talked about two things. We talked about the Ansible initiative in OPI and beginning it, and we talked about Dan's proposal, which I see already got merged during this week. I wanted to ask, did everyone finish reviewing it already? Because I haven't done it in NVIDIA list.
Not yet on my side as well.
Yeah, I assume so. It seems we were eager. Anyway, it's there. It's merged. Yeah, it's merged already. Let's take the next week to review it, have comments, and if someone wants to open a PR to edit it, and add stuff that are missing or things that he objects to, please feel free to do so. I know that I haven't found the correct people to review it in NVIDIA just yet, so I haven't signed off on it, and I think that other vendors are in the same situation.
Let's revert it. If it's merged by mistake, let's revert it and reintroduce a pull request.
That's also a bet. I just think that the fact that it is there might encourage people to to review it more urgently, but I don't have any objection to reverting it and taking our time.
Yeah,
what do you think?
The underlying challenge is providing a means to have that discussion, and a revert is one way to handle it. A issue is another way to handle it, as long as there's consensus that whatever the outcome is, that the appropriate action path is taken. So in some communities, yes, it would be reverted at this point. In other communities, it would be an issue maybe, and further discussion would take place.
Does anyone have any objection to reverting it and open it as a new PR?
No objection.
Okay, perfect. And we'll do so. Okay. Getting back to, unless anyone has something to add on Dan's PR, then I think we can continue to the Ansible part that we discussed last time. I'm currently at the phase of trying to locate people in NVIDIA that have the capacity to start working on it as soon as possible, let's say. Not that simple of a task, but we are heading there. Did any one of the other vendors did some thinking internally, found people that can contribute to this effort, or have an example of what he wants to contribute? Because NVIDIA, we already have our DPU ops, which is, let's say, our baseline.
At Intel, we are exactly at the same stage of identifying the people, but since it's the middle of winter holidays, we are unable to meet in, to have a quorum on that. But I have some candidates, so I'll keep you posted on the progress of that.
Thank you very much. If you can update me, if you can update me between the meetings, that would also be great. I would love for us to, start a quick sync. Now,
possibly we don't have to line up all the resources to finish the entire development. I think that the most important part is to start, and then progress like offline at the speeds that companies feel comfortable and have resources to go. So I think the most important part, at least for me this week, was I kind of catched up on the Ansibles with Galaxy and the Red Hat certification, all of that. So at least for me, the most important part is to start going, create an Ansible collection, so people can contribute. So we need to at least documentation, a little bit of CI/CD, so people can start contributing in their free time once NVIDIA and Intel and Marvell and others ready to contribute the framework.
And on the Redfish part, I think we don't need anything vendor specific, since we already did the work of identifying what Redfish APIs we want to support. Do you feel like there is a need for a design document before we start developing it? Or are you okay with relying on what we have right now, which is the NVIDIA baseline, and building on that?
I feel that at least maybe not a full-blown design document, but at least we need to agree on what collection we'll have from the capability perspective, so we know the roles at least and modules. So that's for me the most important part, is to agree what we are trying to do. Let's say we want inventory, right? We want firmware updates of what exactly? I would like to understand at least how, I know I work with Bluefield a lot, so I understand what the different firmwares involved there. I want to see what commonality is between the different firmwares and different other vendors. Yeah, Aga, do you know if we already have the drop with the Redfish from Intel, so we can see the schema?
No, they changed the schedule, and we did not, since they pulled it in, we were not ready with the release on 1.3, which was released much earlier, but we are planning it for the next release.
But from the schema perspective, even, it's not officially released on the schema. Can we record the schema using the tools that I showed you, and at least to have some kind of in front of us this schema for the Redfish support, or it's still?
It is still in progress, but maybe at least partially. I'll take a look at what we can do here.
So again, I would like to put something in writing for the plan for the Ansible models, right? So what we're going to support, the inventory, the firmware updates. If we have different firmware updates, I'm not sure if, obviously Intel and NVIDIA have BMC on board. I don't see Chetan. Chetan is here. Chetan, do you have also BMC? Remind me.
Yeah, we do have an MCU.
Okay, so obviously BMC update is the number one. Firmware update of the DPU itself. Probably everybody have a NIC firmware some kind to update. So at least we need to list what things we update. And then the most important part is how you load operating system on top of that. In addition to that, different debug capabilities like log collect, logging, whether it's system event log or something else, through Redfish, console access, BIOS, UEFI settings changes, those things that at least I want to put in writing before we actually go and jump into code implementation. So we'll agree on the scope of this.
I totally agree with you, but one thing we need to add on top of that is that everything we said right now is Redfish based, and I'm sure that there will be also the path for non-Redfish based, so operation from the actual hosts. I know that in NVIDIA we have that path that is very common, that users want to do the initial provisioning from the host and not from the DPU BMC, and then later on either continue to manage it from the host in case no isolation is needed, or manage it through Redfish as like day 1, day 2 operations.
Completely agree. The question that I have is, do we want this to keep as 2 separate modules, or we want different options in the same collection? I don't know yet what is the best answer.
So I think 2 separate models would be ideal. I know from Red Hat's perspective, we highly prefer day 1 deployment of anything on a DP or XPU via remote means and not reliant upon the host operating system having already been in place.
So I'm totally with agreement with Ugar. We need both options, and just wondering if we are throwing everything in the same collection, it will be a little bit of a salad. overwhelmed?
Maybe. I
I
think
don't know.
it really depends on the
I'm
actual
open.
operation, because like installing an operating system might be kind of transparent, but there are things that are very specific that you can do only from the host, and things that are very specific that you can do only from Redfish. So maybe separating them would
Anyways,
make
I think we
sense.
should start with Redfish, right? You agree, right? Let's start with basic things that we can do over Redfish, because that's a commonality between everybody. Not all vendors have RShim or a way to manage from the host. So I think that Redfish would be easier path to code and design. And then once we have that, I'm open to suggestion how we can expand it, either new collection or the same collection. I'm open though, for sure. Julia, a question to Red Hat is, do we want eventually to do the Red Hat certification of this Ansible collection?
I don't know. So Red Hat would prefer only to consume through generic interfaces and not utilize specific modules or code or, from, say, collections in their products. So from a product standpoint, obviously we prefer generic means and to use frameworks and tools that we already have. For community purposes, I don't think that really applies to your question.
Okay. Because I was reading about the restrictions on the certification. And for example, everything that is community general is not certified. And we cannot rely, if we want to certify, we cannot rely on community general. And Redfish module is in the community general. So the question, if we're going with the Redfish path, we cannot certify it. So how certification is important versus not important, I don't know.
I think that the question ends up being, what does certification mean in this context, and what does it result in? Because we have product certification, we have certification for support integration, but that doesn't mean necessarily you can call Red Hat support. It might be that it's for a specific product vertical or integration. So I think those are questions which need to be teased apart and ultimately relate to where are we going, what are we trying to achieve.
I understand. Even from the publishing perspective, obviously everybody can publish on Galaxy, like in Python, same as Ansible. But to publish on the Red Hat official collection, we cannot do if we didn't on the Automation Hub. We cannot do if we didn't do the certification validation.
Can you provide a short session someday, maybe, on the details of that certification process and what needs to be there included and what type of certification that is?
So I'll note that what he's referring to is the Ansible Automation Platform Content Hub to be listed on that I guess, site.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and who is involved then in such a process?
Yeah, official process of requesting the certification validation, Red Hat doing certification, and then we can allow to publish.
Okay.
Even without that, we can still publish on Galaxy, which is most people using for, and we say it's not certified. I just wanted to bring this, if this is going to be a request to have this certified or not. I don't have a strong opinion here or there.
What are the real benefits of the certification?
Listing on the page, basically. So I'm not sure that there's necessarily a direct benefit unless someone has a solid reason to utilize it, at which point maybe that's the point at which we should discuss certification.
Dell, for example, certifies all the Ansibles because our customers expect to do so. So that's why it's important for Dell. But here in OPI DPU space, I'm not sure I have a strong opinion either way. And the biggest benefit is Julia will get paid, right? That's, Red
Oh.
Different budgets.
Okay.
Okay, so I think about certification, we can start off saying this is not the end goal. This would be nice to have later on. Any objections? Yes, no?
Sounds good.
Yeah.
We can
Sounds
always
good.
rewrite it, the code, and make it certifiable. That's fine.
Okay, perfect.
How you want to do
Boris,
it? Planning?
do you have the capacity to do the initial design document for this, or do you want me to take it?
I can if you want me to. No problem. If you want to do it yourself, that's also fine with me. Either way.
If you have the capacity, I would appreciate it, honestly.
No problem. No problem. Unrelated to the design itself, I'm also going to wrap up the repository itself with all the automation and all the needed collection files that you know, I think necessary. So at least I have some starting base, if people don't mind.
That would be great. And we settled on creating 2 separate collections for Redfish and for via host operations, right? Currently.
No, we said we are going to start with Redfish, and then we'll see after we finish, or at least advanced mode of Redfish, we see if it looks nice, if we integrate also the host management, or it's too much and we split it at some point. This is, I think, if you don't mind, that's the...
No, I think it's reasonable. Either way, we are starting with Redfish, so no need to create another collection prematurely. Okay, sounds good to me. Anything else on the Ansible we want to touch base on? Okay.
Sure, maybe
So
let's say, Chetan, did you manage to find somebody who is Ansible experts and contribute from?
No, but it's not yet.
Nothing. Okay.
We're also very
no.
early in the Redfish thing. So
Understand. And do you have the Redfish schema that we can download from the Marvel cards and publish and use? I need to develop. Like, what is my problem right now is I can start developing the Ansible code, but I only have NVIDIA Redfish schema and the real cards to develop across. That's why I need at least some kind of something from Marvell and Intel to show what we're doing. That's why I'm putting pressure a little bit on Chetan and Aga to produce at least something initial.
understand, Boris.
Okay. Gal, another topic on the Ansible is the lab. We now have lab environments.
okay.
So
And we have all the cards of the different vendors on the lab.
yep.
That's news to me.
Yeah. From NVIDIA, when they have BlueField 2, we're in the process of purchasing BlueField 3 as well to add as a card.
And you have BlueField 2 with BMC.
BlueField
I
2
hope.
with BMC. Yes.
Which Intel card do you have?
I think we were supposed to get the Mount Evans cards wired up.
Okay.
We can follow up in the lab meeting or in Slack if you want, Aga. But
Yeah. If you tell me the details, then I'll be able to know if everything's in place to update it. We've got more than one model of a card based on math.
Yeah, I added you to the Slack for the lab, so we can.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I think that when you talked about having all the Redfish for starting implementing, I doubt that we will actually have Intel and Marvell and everyone's Redfish schema in time when you want to start developing. I mean, I'm hopeful but skeptical. Maybe since those operations are kind of common, installing an operating system, pushing firmware. I mean, the Redfish path might change. I hope it won't, but it might change across vendors, or the operations needs to be done before or after. But essentially, the operation itself and like the Ansible method should be the same. So I just assume that we will have some vendor string on the task, and internally we would use whatever the vendor will implement if it's stick with the Redfish API.
So you want the abstraction layer to be at the Ansible, right?
Yeah,
And then
probably.
okay,
I just don't think that we have a way around it either. Otherwise, we will have an Ansible playbook that says Intel OS installation, NVIDIA OS installation, and we just have everything on the same one. Julia, you raised your hand.
Yes,
polite.
so depending on the path, there might be a need to have variation as vendors work to standardize. So the thing to probably keep in mind is OS installation should be generally fairly straightforward, although there's probably more than one way to do it. You could say, I want to boot to network. You could say, I want to boot to this URL. You can possibly treat the OS as firmware, potentially, at which point then you start and encountering more vendor-specific behavior and details, specifically in the software update service. So I think that the key initially is to start getting what would work for X vendor, and then work to consolidate. It might be that a vendor doesn't see one path as viable, or it might be that one vendor has very specific patterns or specific name that's required, and you're not going to really be able to get an idea of that until it's proposed. And so I think you can abstract some things away. You might not be able to abstract everything. And I think initially we should just be prepared to accept that and utilize that as a point where we should go back to our organizations, go, hey, here's where we have a challenge. Is there another way to do this? Is there a better way? Should we be striving in this direction? We should be striving in that direction, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It's just we need that evidence of obviousness of there's difference here.
No, you are right, of course, as always. We just need to hope and strive toward having a common interface. That the only change between Intel and NVIDIA would be this vendor string, for example. But yes, there are cases where for Intel you would need a more detailed processor. For NVIDIA you will need a longer path, I assume.
Or you call your firmware a different name, potentially.
That's something that I hope would be abstracted earlier in the process, but yeah.
Well, there's only one way to find out, to actually start doing it.
As always, you are correct about that as well. Okay, so we'll have a Boris design doc, and we'll continue to build up from there. At least for us, we have a very detailed documentation of how to integrate with Redfish and how to do everything via Redfish. So other vendors, if you have the time and capacity, I would love for you to review it and tell us if you think there are things that differ on your side. So even if we don't have the full API and documentation and everything, you can at least raise the flag and say, this process doesn't work for me, or I don't support that path. We also have the Redfish APIs that we support on the OPI vendor directory, so you can review that as well.
Sure.
Okay.
That would be great. Okay, so now anything else on the Ansible part before we continue?
I didn't want to steer kind of disagreements, but I decided to create this repo with DPU in the name. I know Intel is very IPU, XPU centric. So again, we don't have to kind of take it heavily that I did it on purpose or anything like that. I just want to move forward. We can always rename it, so bear with me. So this is what I did, and I posted a link so people can follow what exactly it looks like and how it progresses.
This is basically the Ansible collection init command, right? Or
Yeah.
Ansible Galaxy init,
Yeah.
whatever. It's been a while. Okay, perfect. So here we have plugins here. And do you want to push the architecture document to the OPI DPU or the lifecycle repository?
I think it should be here, all contained in the same repo.
Sounds good to me. Perfect. One more thing I wanted to suggest, not regarding Ansible. I've been starting to look into NVIDIA projects. We can push towards OPI at some point or another, and identify two potential candidates. So I wanted to get your feedback if other vendors want to collaborate on something like that or not. We have some project that will expose OpenConfig interface to configure the DPU either from the host or from the DPU itself on the network. That basically mean exposing GNMI and GNOI interfaces from the DPU or from the host that manages the DPU to configure it.
And by configure it, you mean the specifically the network interface or some other kind of configuration, because it's a broad term?
So yeah, that's a good question. So there are provisioning operations, which are basically the GNOI parts, like the OS service, file service, stuff like that. And there are more specific configuration which are dictated by OpenConfig. I'm not sure what we target as the MVP for that matter just yet, but it would be basically trying to unify all the different tools that we have for configuring the DPU. So we have like MLX config, a bunch of other tools that we have. For example, set the numbers of SFs or VFs on the DPU remotely, or configure specific services that are running on the DPU. Or, for example, we have the capability to run something like a switch or a router inside the DPU. So we can use existing OpenConfig to configure that network device, because OpenConfig is used a lot in that sense of configuring routers and switches. It's not something that I can tell you I can take next meeting and present it here in the OPI meeting, because I still need to understand what is the current status and what we want, what we can collaborate on, and so on. But do you think that this is something valuable to OPI to have, and other vendors, if you let me know if that's something that you would want to collaborate on?
I guess I'm struggling for words here because I have had people look into this sort of stuff in the past, and they've seen enough variation in OpenConfig and the interfaces, and then the vendor implementations that where basically they've been unable to make forward progress in a non-vendor specific way. Granted, maybe things evolve, maybe things have changed. I don't know if it's directly beneficial to OPI. I think in general, it would be useful if there is better cross-vendor standardization in those areas. But I also think that there's a dividing line there where it kind of crosses over into the larger space, and that's the space that really needs that standardization. So I think it's definitely good for us to discuss, keep in mind, and as you learn more, maybe it is something that can aid and assist here. But I also think that there's an effort to define APIs for doing certain things within this community, and I feel like maybe it also might become a distraction too. I don't know. I just think it's an area that is in need of standardization beyond the scope of OPI at this time as well.
I think we're also covering the API work, right, in the API subgroup. So shouldn't we just delegate to the Mark and the API group? What do you think?
It's
I think
actually a
it-
thought. Maybe we should,
Yeah.
maybe this is something for the API group more than the provisioning group, to have an interface for that.
You still might need the ability to provision and understand. So it's definitely a point we should take a little time to understand. But yeah, it definitely could be something for the API folks to discuss.
I'm sure on the Intel side there was some initiative, and I'm just not sure whether that ended at the discussion stage or something has been implemented. So let me check on that, and if we decide to transfer it to the API forum, I'll direct them there with the effort.
Okay, that's good. So basically my goal out of it would be to achieve like those are the open config paths that we support, and have some sort of generic GNMI, GNOI server that would expose them, and each vendor can implement its own backend according to its own tools. So what I thought of about contributing is basically the non-vendor specific part of this product. And for internal implementation, like NVIDIA internal implementation, that's something I need to look on internally if we can contribute or not. But at least standardize on the APIs.
We took the same approach, Gal. We took the same approach, right? With the bridges. We have our storage bridges, which we have the common part, and we have the vendor-specific part that using that. We took the same approach with other things like EVPN gateway, that we have the common stuff, just receive APIs and persist them versus the plugins using the Netlink interface. So I think that's a good thing if we can have in the same framework that we're doing the OPI open config bridge, for example, that is going to receive all the commands and then translate them to the vendor-specific backend. Yeah, I think we can follow the same process that we've been doing so far. I think it worked really well. So, yeah.
Okay.
This is what we had in mind?
Yeah, I think so. Anyway, it's not something that I can, as I said, not something that I have up my sleeve or anything like that. I'm just trying to research products in NVIDIA that we can collaborate on within OPI. So that was one example that came to my mind. Another one that came to my mind is we had a project which we put on hold for a while of integration into Kubernetes. Into Kubernetes provisioning. So we basically had this idea of creating some sort of a controller which will internally use the bare metal operator and a provisioning system. We internally use the Ironic to provision the DPUs. And use a copy provider called Bring Your Own Host Provider to kind of join the cluster after it is provisioned. This is like in a sentence. The idea here was to create the ability to attach DPUs to an Kubernetes cluster, either a standalone isolated cluster like Red Hat did with the two cluster design that Red Hat pushed for, or just a single cluster that will contain the host and the DPUs. The main benefit of it is for service orchestration on the DPUs. So you can control the services running on the DPUs, deploy them, configure the networking via CNI, and so on.
So this is not an uncommon thing. I've heard of this being done. I think this would now be the fourth way I've heard of being done, all basically using the same basic tools with someone writing some glue on top. I would highly recommend engaging the Metal 3 community regarding that, specifically because they have a meetup tomorrow morning from 1400 to 1600 UTC. I'll paste their meetup planning Google Doc, which has their meeting link for tomorrow morning. They have looks like they have a fairly full agenda. And I don't know about their meeting structure, if they'd be okay for adding a new thing. Last time I know they had a meetup, they only got through like a third of their agenda document. So just something put out there, since a number of folks out there have expressed using bare metal operator and either joining or orchestrating, depending on their exact use case and what their exact business logic and flow needs to be for their environments. That's usually where like some sort of glue code is required. So I'll just put it out there. And if there's cross-pollination and collaboration there, it would probably be a good thing.
That's nice. I'll request access. So do you think that's something we want to drive only on bare metal operator community, or do you think that there is a benefit to having some sort of an OPI controller or OPI operator to Kubernetes, which will enable provisioning of DPUs directly from a Kubernetes cluster?
I would engage the Metal Cube community or Metal 3 community to discuss bare metal operator first, specifically because I think people are already doing it. Based upon various discussions I've had, people are just taking a different approach once the OS is on the card. And I think that's kind of, if there's an opportunity to standardize there for bare metal operator, I think it would make a lot of sense. I think it really depends on how people view their cluster and what labels they want to apply as well. And that's also a very opinionated area, I think. So I would encourage reaching out, discussing with them. If you can join their meetup tomorrow, I'd highly encourage it. I anticipate I'll be there as well. And see what their thoughts are, because I know some folks in that community are working on very similar things or have most of that already done for their specific use case or in hardware.
Thank you. Try to take it with them. Anyone else have any other topics or things you want to touch base on? Okay. Then in that case, I'll post in Slack the meeting summary. If anyone wants to dig in internally and find other things that you may have worked on and want to try to bring to OPI and standardize on for the next time we meet, it would be great. Either way, see you next time.
Thank you. See you.
Thank you, Gal.
Thank you.
Thank you.